This week's episode was pretty weird. The webtoon is very different from the anime, and I think the anime is good, but a lot of things were skipped in the episode that were pretty important in character and plot development. So I'll be going over everything the anime skips to give you guys a fuller understanding of the story. God of High School Episode 9, Curse/Cornered, covering chapters 61 through 68, and a portion from chapters 72 and 73. So the anime actually skips all of chapter 61 along with most of chapter 62, so I'll just briefly go over what was in the webtoon in these two chapters just to catch you guys up. So first off, in the webtoon we get a little more details and clarification about Nox and why they're targeting Mori in the first place. So they, along with Mujin Park, seem to be looking for the key, which was noted in last week's episode, but they also have determined that Mori and Ilpyo have a changing power level. The Nox members decide to go after Mori's team and capture Mori since Daiwi's not able to fight this week. So their plan is to lure out Mori, making it a 3 versus 1 match against Mira so they could easily defeat Mira and capture Mori at the same time. So the next part in the webtoon is Mori starting his search for Taijin up to the copy of Taijin blowing up, but this part in the anime is actually completely changed, and so much of this portion was changed that it's practically just skipped in the anime. So in the anime last week, Mori got a letter containing Taijin's whereabouts along with a picture of him missing his arm. But in the anime, this letter was actually just delivered anonymously to his door, so after hearing the doorbell ring, he opened it up and found out where Taijin was being held. So in the webtoon, Mori got the letter from a purple-haired boy. He told Mori that he was one of the original members of Team Jeju, and Nox actually killed and replaced all of his teammates, but decided to spare him because he had a useful ability called Doppelganger. He also said that he was currently being imprisoned with Taijin, and that he left a copy of himself with Taijin and snuck out to look for help. Mori believed this story, so the pair traveled to the warehouse together, with Mori in hopes of rescuing his grandfather. So once they get to the warehouse, they eventually stumble upon the cage and were able to break in, but as soon as they did, Taijin blew up, but the boy in the cage saved Mori from dying to the explosion. So it turns out that the whole thing was actually just a setup to lure Mori towards the bomb so that they could knock him out and capture him. So now that I explained that chronologically, I just want to explain what actually went down since this part of the story was pretty convoluted. So the original boy was locked in the cage with Taijin. Then a Nox member named Peilong changed his appearance to look exactly like the boy and made a bomb that looked like Taijin. Then Peilong went to go find Mori. He lured Mori in with a fake story and blew him up. Then since he was done with the boy, he stabbed the original and transformed back into his normal form. And just to clarify some other things, everyone that Mori ran into in his whole experience was fake, and Peilong actually forced the boy from Team Jeju to make a ton of doppelgangers to trick Mori in an attempt to capture him. As I said before in the anime, Mori simply received a letter with Taijin's location, then when he got to Taijin, he blew up. And honestly, I kind of think that the anime was way better than the webtoon here. I get that it was something that was present in the webtoon that was taken away in the anime, but honestly it was really convoluted in the webtoon and even didn't make that much sense to me the first time I read it. Also, the boy that Mori met really isn't that important and doesn't show up again, so it makes sense why this whole part was cut, just to make things make a lot more sense and I guess to save time in the episode. Now going back to the anime, the next scene showed Mira, Daiwi, and Judge P discussing the situation just about Mori not being there and Daiwi being suspended, just basically explaining how Mira has to do all of this by herself. The only difference was that in the webtoon, it was a conversation just between Mira and Daiwi as they were ringside before their match without Judge P being present in it. And even though this was a slight difference, I actually prefer the scene more in the webtoon because it seemed more natural as teammates would be discussing strategy, whereas in the anime it almost dumbs down Mira and Mori needing a judge to explain the situation to them, and it also just seemed a lot more info dumpish since it was a third-party character. And now on to chapter 63. The next scene in the anime, we get the start of the match between Mira and Marin. In the webtoon, Marin gets a lot more gas initially. So Marin was hyped up. He's like this prodigal child, and he was born in the ocean, and he came to land on a sea turtle's back. He was loved by the sea, and he had a normal head initially, but after hundreds of dives, his head ended up changing shapes. So this was pretty cool gas. I liked just how they hyped up Marin. I always like to see side characters and other characters getting hyped up and given a background and history in any anime or story I watch in general. But again, I understand why it was cut, but some of these things really do just start to add up. Even though they technically don't matter in the grand scheme of the story, I feel like when you start skipping a lot of the details, some of the story just starts losing some of its impact and emotional value. So besides this introduction and gassing up of Marin, the first part of the fight until where Marin starts using a sword is pretty much the exact same in both the webtoon and the anime. Now before I get into the rest of the fight, I'm gonna quickly jump to chapters 72 and 73, which cover the scene with Bora and Daiwi. The fight was pretty much the same in both, but there was a lot more detail in the webtoon. The fight was probably around a chapter and a half in total, and it just was a lot cooler, showed a lot more action, and also made a lot more sense. Also, in the fight in the webtoon, Mira ended up showing up to stop Bora from kicking Daiwi again, so there's that. And also the kiss between Daiwi and Bora had a little more context in the webtoon. In the webtoon, after Daiwi was able to basically defeat Bora, Bora just thought he was really cool and decided to kiss him, so there's also that. Now going back to chapter 64 and the fight between Mira and Marin. So as we all know, in the anime, Marin started dominating Mira, but right before she passed out, she unlocked her Chariot, summoned her sword, and won the match. But honestly, this was a bit Mary Sue-ish. It really didn't make sense how she just magically got a Chariot in the middle of a fight where she would lose if she didn't get it. And also it didn't make sense in the anime how she instantly got her sword back as soon as she unlocked her Chariot. And pretty unsurprisingly, this isn't how things went down whatsoever in the fight in the webtoon. Again, this part was very different in the webtoon, so I'm just going to explain the entire fight. So in the webtoon, as soon as Marin got the sword, he was just flexing on Mira and essentially just gave her a lesson on how to use ancient weapons in general. He said that the first rule was that once you are a weapons master, you can summon it from anywhere. And this is why even when Mira was able to take the sword from Marin, Marin was able to easily just summon it back. This explanation yet again made more sense because in the anime, Marin just said something along the lines of only a true user can hold it, but here it makes more sense how if you can summon it anywhere, no one else would be able to use it. The second rule is that a national treasure can amplify your borrowed power without breaking. Marin explaining this made sense later as to what his Chariot could do, and it also just hyped up national treasures even more, along with their significance as to why people would want to use them. After this explanation, Marin started beating on Mira, and Mira was on the brink of defeat, and since she was about to lose, she decided to use her Chariot. In the anime, she learned it on the spot, but in the webtoon, she knew it ahead of time. It's just that she didn't really want to rely on a Chariot because she wanted to prove to herself that she was strong enough to keep up with Daiwi and Mori. So we got a flashback of when she learned to use her Chariot. It was actually when she was training with Judge P, and then she visualized the Chariot and she learned it a pretty good bit of time before the fight actually started. Her Chariot was also portrayed very differently in the webtoon and the anime. The first difference being that she didn't get the sword back after transforming. This actually makes sense because Mira simply just using a Chariot shouldn't make the sword accept her as her master all of a sudden. But another thing is Mira's whole fight style was a lot different. In the anime, it was really nothing special. She just got the sword back, launched one attack, and was able to easily defeat Marin. But in the webtoon, she got to have a completely unique and new fighting style. Since she was still swordless, she was using her swordless style attacks, and all of her strikes, slashes, and punches were actually extremely slow. But the lack of the speed in her attack was greatly made up for with her unfathomable damage. Essentially, she was striking in slow motion, but every time she landed a hit on Marin, it would send him flying, depleting his HP by almost 90% or so. Even though Mira was in such a monstrous state, she wasn't able to eliminate Marin on the spot because Marin's teammates were actually interfering. Were using some kind of technique which messed with her ears, which not only disrupted her balance but also messed with her accuracy when trying to attack Marin. And even after all of that, Marin got revealed to have even more hacks because his Chariot boosted by the National Treasure regenerated all of the damage he took earlier in the fight. Due to all of the foul play and Marin's ridiculous durability, Mira was about to lose the fight. Marin threw her up in the air and was about to stab her through the heart. Right before she reached Marin, Mori threw in the towel and caught her. The next difference was just because of how the tournament's structured in the anime and the webtoon. In the anime, you only need 2 wins, but in the webtoon, essentially every single person on a team needs to be defeated. And to be defeated, even if you win a match, for example, and then you decide not to compete in the next one, that would count as a loss for your team. So that's why essentially in the webtoon, we get to see everyone fight normally, unless one person's able to just completely eliminate another team by himself like Jagal can normally do. And because of this difference, the next fight was actually Mori versus Marin. But this really wasn't much of a fight. He easily defeated Marin, and it was only like 4 panels or so just because Mori was that much stronger. Then, just like in the anime, Mori ran through the next 2 opponents, winning the match for his team. After Mori's insane performance, the 6 discussing Mori was also the same in both the webtoon and the anime. And that marks the end of the episode and chapter 68. Overall, the episode was pretty good. It was different than the webtoon, but still pretty good. So I can't really give the anime too much crap for this episode, but I did enjoy the webtoon chapters that were covered a lot more in the webtoon than I did in the anime. I just felt like all of the characters and everything happened just had a lot more time to flesh out in the webtoon than it did in the anime, but the episode was still fine overall. If you love God of High School or have any suggestions for future videos, make sure to leave it in the comments, and if you want to keep up with everything God of High School and all of my future content, make sure to like and subscribe.